welcome to everybody for the 26th annual gathering with our Idaho legislators, allied Idaho elected leaders, supportive organizations, and sponsors. And Jim will get into that in a bit here. I want to set a context. The Society of American Foresters has been doing this for some years. So some of you may be familiar, some of you may not, so I'm going to do a little primer here. It won't take long. The Society of American Foresters is America's forestry professionals organization. The motto is striving forests, essential resources, and strong communities. Hosting today, up on the board here, is that we have two SAF units. The Inland Empire, which encompasses Idaho, north of the Salmon River, and eastern Washington to Canada's border. So that's a pretty large area. And then I'm chair, Darrell Knops, I'm chair of the Intermountain section. It's southern Idaho, south of the Salmon River, western Wyoming counties that border Idaho, and the states of Utah and Nevada. So if you look at this together, these two units have practitioners and people, organizations that work in this large landscape. And together, there's about 50 million acres of private public forests, family forests, woodlands, urban and community forests, and tribal nations forests. To give you an example, at least what our local Intermountain group does, we have three focuses: forest, wildfires, status, and trends, which we spoke to at the 22 FDAL get-together. Second area of emphasis is forest innovation, technology, markets, and products. And the third one is effective distributive learning systems. This is where we work with things like Project Learning Tree. We have the two universities. The University of Idaho up in Moscow has a student group, and the university at Utah State has one where some of our members are bringing them together for field trips, and they're part of our membership in our community. And this also provides us with these distributive learning systems with outreach capability, advocacy capability, and just trying to get some word out to people to build the public knowledge, citizens' knowledges of forestry and natural resources and how that kind of operates. So these systems are also important to enhance our SAF members' competencies. We have certified programs that touch both the wildland forests as well as the urban forests. And it also helps, like I said, improve citizen access to forestry and natural resources knowledge. So it's an honor to introduce a colleague here who's going to take the next part of this. And Jim, do you want to come up?
Well, thank you, Darrell, and let me add my welcome to all of this. I'm not Peter Stegner. I'm Jim Riley. I'm the Riley part of Riley Stegner and Associates. It's kind of interesting to see a few familiar faces in this room from my days in the State House, but that's been a while back. The Senate is still on the floor, I think, debating some measure, I believe. Is that an indication, Sage, that the House is operating a lot more efficiently these days than the Senate? I mean, is that just... Okay, all right, we'll keep an eye on that going forward. Our firm has been facilitating and hosting Forestry Day at the Legislature now for almost 30 years. And the reason we started it 30 years ago is the same reason today. Forestry and the forest products industry of Idaho is practiced in some of the most remote places of our state. In the manufacturing side today, things go on inside those buildings with the most modern technology and some of the most trained people you'll see everywhere, but it's very difficult to get all of you to come out and see what we do in the woods and in those communities. So one day a year, we try to come down to Boise here and get you all together and give you a little glimpse of what our industry is all about. For the last 2 years, we've been in partnership with the Society of American Foresters, which you just heard from Darrell. I'm a proud member of that. Prior to that, we always have been in partnership with the Associated Logging Contractors. Sean Keogh's here somewhere. That's the men and women, the very talented men and women who practice sustainable forestry in the woods every day, harvesting trees, planting trees, and other forest practices. The sponsors are on your table. There's a list of them. I'm going to ask if a representative of each member sponsor company to stand up quickly and just introduce yourself so you get a face with the name and the place where these people are from. So Matt, where's the rest of you? Come on. Tom, Ellen, where's the rest of you, the sponsors?
I'm Matt Van Fleet, Clearwater Paper. We got the little mill in Lewiston. 1,300 employees, average pay is about $70,000 a year. Our highest pay there for an hourly employee is about $125,000. We're in the midst of starting the largest investment, maintenance, overhaul of the mill this summer. It'll be down for a long time. So if you haven't got a hotel room for some need, and from Riggins to Post Falls, from June to July, you're probably not going to get one. But about probably another $100 million of investment still in this. But and I just found out last week while I was in Washington D.C. with some other industry folks, we are the largest pulp mill in America. 1,300 employees, USW workers, IDW workers. We continue to invest in the mill and just grow.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Trevor?
I'm Trevor Stone, I'm the Idaho Timberlands Manager for Tom Nationality. We're the state's largest private landowner. We have 630,000 acres of timberland, Clearwater, Layton, Venema, and Shoshone counties. Also have a dimension lumber mill and plywood mill in St. Mary's. Employ roughly 375 people at that place. Roughly 30 foresters work for me. And yeah, be glad to host any of you for a day in the woods whenever they get out.
All right. Moving on.
I'm Colin Chambers. I'm the Director of Land Operations for DF Development. We're a privately held family forest of 151,000 acres. We still practice sustainable forest management, and I'm also the president for SIPA.
Right. Thank you. Charlie?
Hi, Charlie McKenna. I'm from Idaho Forest Owners Association. I've been telling a number of you that we think of ourselves as the invisible forest, but we control 1.8 million acres of Idaho forest. We're 36,000 individual forests, and we think we represent around 140,000 registered voters.
Thank you, Charlie. Patrick?
My name is Patrick Marola. I'm the Timberlands Manager for Manulife Investment Management. We manage about 122,000 acres across northern Idaho. We have 5 foresters in Idaho, and we have an active timber management programs applying to Clearwater, IFG, and all the other sawmills.
Thank you, Patrick.
John Yance, Stella Jones, we're in the cedar pole business, operations in Juliana, Idaho, and Sandpoint. And we supply utilities in Idaho, not just harvest poles and process them, but we supply the utilities in Idaho with poles, Idaho Power, Vista's footprint in Idaho. We have a lot of other smaller utilities.
Thank you, John. Tom?
I'm Schultz with Idaho Forest Group. We employ about 1,100 people. We've got about 70,000 acres of big timberlands that we manage in eastern Washington and Idaho. We've got 5 sawmills we operate. We also have Baker Trucking Company that we run, residual material. We've got mills in Grangeville, Lewiston, just north of Coeur d'Alene, Chilco. We've got a kind of a flagship mill in Cleve, and we've got a mill in Boise Springs. So we recently, and last year, started operating a mill down in Mississippi as well, so operating kind of in the south now. But thanks for coming, thanks for your support.
Thanks, Tom. Ellen?
I'm Ellen Stanford. I'm the Operations Director at Multis Woodlands Group in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And we are a timber investment management organization, much like Manulife. So we manage properties on behalf of other clients. We are the management entity for those clients. You know, we have a management agreement with them. We have about 80,000 acres in the Idaho Panhandle and just north of 17,000 acres in northeast Washington in those 3 counties. So, yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ellen.
Tyler Madison with Stinson Lumber Company. We own 3 sawmills in Idaho and roughly 165,000 acres of family-held timberland.
Very good. Last?
John Littlehunt, on behalf of the 800 tree farmers in the state of Idaho, welcome. And we work very close with the Idaho Forest Owners Association on similar type of assistance or working with private landowners on that part of it. So
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you all. These are the people who are bringing you lunch. And they employ thousands of great jobs here in Idaho, and they're still the backbone of much of the economy, north and south. So with no more further ado, I want to introduce our program. We want to bring some information to you. It's my honor to introduce the Dean of the College of Natural Resources at the University of Idaho, Dennis Becker. Dennis, the College of Natural Resources also houses the premier forestry school in the United States, perhaps in the world. So Dennis, to you.
You know, I'm not going to argue with that. And it just saves me from having to say it because that's what we believe. It's really my privilege to be here. It's always wonderful to have this opportunity to speak with you about the importance of forestry in the state. You know, we manage these forests, we collectively, from these partners that you heard from here, manage these forests in a sustainable way. And that doesn't come by accident. The fish that we seek, the wildlife that we view, the timber that we use, the products that you see on your table that you use every day, those don't happen by accident. It requires a trained workforce. And so my job here today is just to set a little bit of a context for you in relation to how many jobs is that? How many board feet is that? So let's start with a little bit of context, and I'm gonna give you a few numbers. We're going to follow up with you later. We being the Idaho Forest Products Commission, Jennifer Oakland and I, we will send this information to you. We have all kinds of information about your local districts, about the communities that you live in, and what the jobs mean in those areas. So we'll follow up with you with more specific information. So to put it in context, let's start with what is a board foot. So us in forestry like to think in terms of board foot as a volume. So 1 foot. Let's see, is that right? My fish is a little bit big today. 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. So that's a cube. So think about that cube as we go through this. So on average, we've been harvesting around 1 billion of those cubic feet or those board feet on an annual basis. Last year, well, these numbers are 2000 and 2022. So I'm going to give you all 2022 numbers because that's the most recent year that we have consistent information across all categories. We have more recent information we can certainly share with you if necessary. But that 1 billion board feet comes off of a variety of lands, some of the managers that you heard about here as well. Private, non-industrial lands, public lands, federal and state. And so how does that change over time? And this graph here shows you really what those trends are. So in this last year, or the last year that we're reporting here anyway, about half of that, a little more than half of that came off of private land. So that's both industrial, your small family forest landowners, as well as industrial. So your larger landowners, your Mopus, your Potlatch Deltic, your Manulife, and so forth. About 30% of that came off of state lands in 2022 and 19% off of federal lands. Now, what you're seeing here is that it is a slight decrease, about a 6% decrease from the year previous. If I was showing you numbers, and we can get these numbers, we have these numbers for 2023, you're going to see that, as is expected, that volume harvested has gone down. And that's strictly because of prices, just a softening of demand that we see in the marketplace caused by a variety of factors, inflation, and so forth. That obviously is going to change the distribution of where those trees are harvested. On general, private landowners are much more price sensitive, so you're going to see a decrease in harvest in those areas when that happens. So standard supply demand, right, Charlie? Charlie, I'm looking at Charlie as the old economics professor at the University of Idaho, making sure I get this right. I did okay in that class. I'm doing good. All right, thank you. Let's do this. Does that go forward? Yeah. So again, every one of those cubes, every one of those 1 by 1 foot cubes generates certain economic activity. So in terms of 2022, that generated about $1.6 billion in sales. $1.6 billion. So that's those sales then, and I'll give you some labor income dollars here in a little bit, but those sales generate certain activity within those communities in which they exist. And this graph here just shows what that sort of trend is over time. So what does that mean? What is the bottom line? What does that mean for your communities and your districts? So in 2022, every one of those board feet generated, on average, about 30 jobs. 18 of those jobs were what we term in sort of direct employment, that being the forest management, the harvest operations being the logging and trucking and the work that happens in the woods, the wood products, paper, furniture manufacturing. And you can see in this graph, and when you get this in your inboxes, you can really understand sort of where value is derived in the supply chain and where the jobs are really created in the supply chain. So in total, about 29,000 jobs existed in the industry in 2022, being those direct jobs I just described, but also those indirect jobs. So for for 1 million of those cubes that I talked about, there's about 12 indirect or support jobs that are also created. So those are your grocery store owners, your dentists, your school teachers, all those other services that a community enjoys from the infusion of that labor income into that community. About $2.2 billion in particular, specifically in labor income across the state of Idaho within those communities, which translates to just shy of about $3 billion to the state's gross GDP. Put that in context, I think last time I looked, that's somewhere probably around 3.5% of state GDP, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but especially north of the Clearwater, or especially in some of these communities that are heavily dependent upon those jobs, Lewiston, Orofino, Kamei, Bonner, those jobs are terribly critical within those communities, and it's much, much greater than 3.5% in those areas. I think the point that where I'll sort of take this and then sort of handing this off is that those jobs, again, just don't happen by accident. So I'm really proud of the work that we do for our part at the University of Idaho. We train students in 2-year degrees, associate degrees. We train them in 4-year bachelor degrees and advanced degrees. Those jobs are really important, but there's a lot of other jobs and a lot of other training that's vitally important. And so being able to provide sort of educational pathways that enable the overall industry is just absolutely critical. So with that, in the sake of time, I'm going to pause and shift to the introduction of our next speaker. We can take questions afterwards. I can get you more information, of course, but Superintendent Critchfield, I'd like to introduce and bring to the stage. So the superintendent has been just so supportive of working with us and thinking about how we can train a broad workforce to help across the forest products industry in all the different ways that we need that. Just thank you so much for your support.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. In an effort to understand the role and responsibility of sitting on the state land board, I really pursued my own education of sorts, understanding the logging, forestry, and timber industries. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures that are fun, but also very instructive. If I can, it's the large green button. Thank you. Well, we've got Blake up here, and so in this effort of getting around and understanding how we are leveraging our partners in higher education with our industry partners, training our students at the local level, particularly as we look at high schools in North Central and North Idaho who could have had flourishing forestry programs were it not for some shortages in resources. I started to connect some dots. This is, again, just learning about the species of trees. I really have become quite fascinated and intrigued by the whole process. I was able to join some teachers who went out into the woods to understand how they can better train and educate their students, not simply about jobs in forestry, but also how all of this interconnects and benefits our state. And I have to say, as I stand up here by a $61 million check, I respect that 90% of that comes from the timber industry. So it's a a big deal, to put it simply. So I had the opportunity to go with a private logger. Some of you may be familiar with a man by the name of Jody Hendricks. He also sits as a school board chair in St. Mary's. And I'm not sure where Sean Keogh ended up, but she helped coordinate the opportunity to go up to the very top of a mountain and see how that works in person. If you have not done that, I want to become the salesperson for having you do that. It was one of the most incredible experiences that I've been able to experience. One of the most fascinating individuals was a gentleman that's the sire in the white hat who insisted that we call him Grape Nuts. And so he got out his saw and pointed like Babe Ruth to a corner of a stadium and said, "This is where the tree is going to fall." And that's where it landed. And I videoed the whole thing and showed it repeatedly to my family, and my grandkids loved it. And I'm so excited about what this industry is and what it does. And after we were able to have this time with Jody and what he's doing as a small logger, as a private contractor, he then drove us over to a larger operation that was on the other side of the mountain. And as we drove up, let's see, I'll go back and just leave it there. We were able to have a good conversation about the missing pieces and the gaps. Now, many of you are aware that I have a very keen and passionate interest in connecting our students with skills. Knowing something is incredibly powerful and valuable, but if you don't know how to do something with the knowledge, what is it that we're missing? And so prior to becoming elected, again, wanting to understand how the natural resources of our state come together through education and driving our economy, I also had the opportunity to go with Tom Schultz and go and tour the mill in Chilco. And then I started having conversations with parents and students and community leaders, and we recognized that there were some gaps in the career technical programs that could be available on our school campuses. And so last year, about this time, if not within a couple of days, we began a process with Representative Boyle, who's in the room, to propose what is now called the Idaho Career Ready Students Grant Fund. And I want to thank our legislators that are here in the room for supporting that. What the grant has enabled our schools to be able to do is to write a proposal to receive a grant. It's an 11-member council, and we have met 3 times. We're going to actually meet again on Friday. There was $45 million that was appropriated, one-time money for this fund, and I like to think of it as seed money to get us going to see what we could fund that was outside of what the federal government and what the state said, here is your box. Guess what? Outside of that box were all of the forestry, logging, timber skills that we needed. And so as we've gone through the proposals, I got to look at my notes here. So as of yesterday, we've had a total of 150 requests that total $133 million. Now, it's not all forestry, but $133 million worth of requests to support career technical education at our middle schools and our high schools. Now, as I mentioned, we had $45 million to work with, and so this has not been an easy task to go through these. We started with the premise that they're all good things, but we have to think about it good, better, best. What's serving the best amount of students, what's sustainable, what is driving and satisfying the local economy, and then what are our students interested in? And through the process, we identified about 10 high schools that were interested in having some type of a forestry program. Now, not everyone was at a place where they could apply for the grant, because this isn't really Shark Tank, where we wanted you to bring your crazy idea and then we're going to give you money and then we hope it works. These are taxpayer dollars, and we took it very seriously. If you were ready, could you sustain it? Did you have an instructor? Did you have students to fill the classes? And so as of the end of November, the council has already accepted 5 proposals from high schools to either develop or support logging and natural resource programs, and that total is $3.5 million, and really is close to almost about 7 to 10% of all of the money that we received. I mentioned that on Friday we're going to meet again as a council. There's $9-ish million left. in the fund, and we're okay with that because we got the money to give out. We didn't get it to think about it and say, look at all this money that we have. We wanted to put it to use. And so we know that the council will consider an additional 6 proposals from local school districts to support or develop logging programs. One of the things that is very exciting to me as it pertains particularly to forestry programs, the University of Idaho has a well-founded and sustainable 2-year program. So we're talking to kids in 2 ways about this. We're saying there are skills that you can develop in these classes that you don't have to leave your hometown if you're interested in being in logging and timber. And if that's the job that you want to have, we're going to create programs or help support programs that give you the skills that you need to do that. And then for students who want a little bit more, there's a pathway for you to go and actually get a degree in that and to be able to, continue down that road. We also have some great champions. So Blake Manley, we've worked closely with him. We're taking advantage of his expertise and a little bit of an advantage of the University of Idaho and sending him to high schools so that they can see what can be in these fields. And those are resources that our schools wouldn't normally have access to. The other part of this that I think is a really important and I guess, just something that we want to call out. Industry has also stepped up. One of the things that the council determined early on was that they were not going to pay for curriculum. We wanted schools, they needed to have some skin in the game themselves. We weren't going to pay for absolutely everything. And for a number of reasons, curriculum was one of those things that we determined was not going to make the cut. And we, through the leadership of Tom and others and Sean and a variety of people, we've been able to get folks around the table in industry to say, while we're teaching kids about your industry, tell us what you want them to know. So many times we feel and hear this disconnect of what our students have learned in high school, and they may feel that they're prepared for something, and then they get on the job, and the boss is like, yeah, I didn't need you to know those things. And so we've got this opportunity with the money and with the partnerships and with all of the leadership and just the momentum behind it to create something really incredible that industry is saying this is what we want our kids to be able to know and do. The schools are going to be able to buy the equipment or add on to a shop. We've got the expert guidance and support of people from higher ed and people in the industry to say this is how all of these things come together. Now, I know that we're here to celebrate and talk about the benefits of this program as it relates to forestry. You won't be able to see this, and I should have thought about this on the slideshow, but I was so excited about grape nuts and all of this stuff that I forgot. But and we made this available for our legislators, and so we'd be happy to share it with anyone. But it's a little map of how we are supporting career technical education all over the state, from creating programs in Middleton for meat packing, to anything from culinary to fish hatcheries and all of the things in between. What we love about this program is that it is not a one-size-fits-all. It's what your kids in your community and your high school can do. Before I sit down, again, I want to offer my thanks to all of you for the tremendous amount of support. We're excited to see where this goes, how it grows. I want to call attention to 2 people that are with me in the room. Carl Crabtree works with me now. Some of you will remember him from his Senate days at the Department of Education. He is the liaison to the Land Board and has just his expertise and experience has been critical in connecting us in ways that help us move down the road on this. And then Allison Duman is the program manager for the Career Ready Students Grant, and she gets all of the information together and works with the school district so that when we meet as a council, we have the information that we have to make good decisions. And so with that, I thank those that have organized it, Jim, and I know Peter's not here, for the opportunity to come and share with you a little bit about what we've got and where we believe we'll go and what we think this will do for kids and for our state. Thank you so much.
I'm not a podium person. I'm gonna walk around, and I'm a coach, so everyone can hear me a little bit, right? We can hear me. Okay, we're not on the floor, right? So I don't have to be that formal, I hope. I'm Blake Manley. For the recording. You will need that guy. Yeah, okay, how about that? That's still too loud, isn't it? How about way down here? Yeah. All right, I'm Blake Manley. I work at the University of Idaho. I'm the program manager for workforce development with the CNR. Most of the time I'm at the forest, and so it's great because people want to get a hold of me. And if you've ever been on the University of Idaho forest, you know one thing: no cell phone coverage. So I get to do the job that I want to do when I'm up there. I come from industry background. My dad's a logger, my grandpa's a logger, my great-grandpa's a logger. Sawdust runs through my veins very, very deeply. But I went to college, and when they graduate from college and you've put $50,000 in debt or whatever it was, I kind of blocked that number out, whatever it was. You feel like you have to do something with that. So I became a log buyer. Then I became a timber sale prep guy for the Forest Service. Then I was a mill supervisor, and all the time, guess what? Not what I wanted to do, right? And so I'm going along this path that I have to do. I don't want to do any of it, right? So after step 4, I go back to step 1, and I said, hey, Dad, I want to come back to work. I like being a logger. It's where my passion is. So I went back in 2011 working for Dad, logging and coaching, and then athletic directing, because dummy here didn't realize long ago that my favorite part of life was working with young people. The logging was great, the log buying was great, the industry was great, all that was great. Young people are awesome. If you're not involved with our youth today, you're missing out. Everyone says they've changed. Thank God they have, right? Holy cow. My grandpa used to yell at my dad, oh, you're just different than I was. And I was like, yeah, because when Dad was growing up, he had a motorcycle. And when Grandpa was growing up, they didn't have motorcycles, right? So, yes, different. Well, youth of today is different too. We invented this thing, right? When I was growing up, I'm not that old, but when I was growing up, we didn't have this, right? They are different today, thank goodness, right? So I became a high school forestry teacher, which I didn't know was a thing when I was graduating from college, or I would not have graduated from college with a forestry degree. I would have graduated with a forestry degree to be a teacher. It's a great picture. So my life, that's kind of the cliff notes of my life. Where are we at today? Well, today our youth are part of that bridge, right? Our industry is the other side of that bridge. We're trying to build something that goes together, right? But we've continually done this for a generation, for 2 generations, I don't know how long, especially in the forestry industry. We've never built the rest of the bridge, right? So I got to be a forestry teacher for a while, and I got to build the rest of that bridge. Right? And that bridge that I was building, and we're going to listen to 3 of my former students here in a minute. The bridge I was building wasn't a one-stop shopping. It wasn't for just foresters. Right? It wasn't just for loggers. It was for every single step of the entire industry. Because if you haven't looked at the check, let's go on Superintendent Critchfield's numbers, and there's 90% of that $61 million is from the timber revenue. Okay, if we don't have loggers, no $61 million. Right? The average age of a logger right now is 57 years old. There's more loggers that are 60 years old and older than there are 30 years and younger. Why is that? Because they don't see it. They've never seen it. We've never given them a chance to see it. We've always figured, logging companies, and they'll figure it out, right? Lumber mills, they figure it out, right? We're not figuring it out because this is where kids get their information today. And are we on that? Not like other places, right? It's not a typical way. Loggers don't go to social media, or they just don't do it that way, right? Let's listen to my 3 former students. You got that?
How I ended up in forestry is kind of a long story, but not really. My grandfather was an old logger, and he got me into it. He really encouraged me to look outside and look at my surroundings. And then in high school, my brother convinced me to join the forestry team. And at that time, we didn't have classes or the setup for it like what Manly brought in. We just had a go out and you can do fun things with trees, like throwing axes. and climbing a pole, and I thought that that was so much fun and really cool. And then when Manly came in and they brought in the program for the classes, I really enjoyed all of that. And so I decided that I wanted to go to college to teach, and teach forestry for that matter. So I started getting myself lined up, and I realized that I wanted work experience. And CTC presented that opportunity with me for timber cruising and surveying.
We're here with Tristan Calkins, a former Sweet Home High School student of mine, who is now a choker setter here with THI. Tristan, what got you started in this?
The original start would probably be the forestry class in Sweet Home High School. I didn't know what a choker was or much of anything about logging until then. And then my uncle, who still works for THI, is a cutter and was out in the brush with us and got me out here when we were short on hands.
Cade, why did you choose this as your career? I mean, because you had a lot of options you could be doing right now, yet you choose to be here.
Actually, your class helped me because assignment that you had to call someone's boss and talk to him. And I talked to my dad's boss, which is a yarder engineer, and I talked to Brock Coda. And then I always been interested in it, you know, because my dad's been doing it.
What do you enjoy about being out here?
I love being in the woods. You can find shed horns, nice, beautiful weather. Sometimes not always beautiful, but yeah.
You were saying you saw something cool earlier this week?
I saw some bobcats.
Cool.
This morning.
Coming to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rare. Not everybody gets to see a bobcat.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool, right? So I've got 5 minutes, they say. That's okay. I can talk fast. 5 minutes I can't even talk about those three in 5 minutes. Lysana is now the professor at Umpqua Community College because she wanted to be in forestry education. So, good student, 3.99 GPA in high school, went on successful, very successful. Tristan Calkins went to 1 semester to college and said, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. That doesn't feel right to me, right? He's going back to college now 4 years later, right? But he had a different route that he could do because he had seen it. And Cade was one of those kids where you don't know where they're going to end up, right? And it was funny and sad and hard and all those things, but because we gave him a route, he ended up with a $26 an hour paying job that he loves to go to work to do, right? And that's only because they saw it in class, okay? I'm not going to talk about every single one of these, but I'm going to talk about the top 2. Adrian Cass, the one in orange, great kid, right? Doesn't want to go to college. Great kid. So we're building fire trail for our fire day, right? Hands-on, good experience, not just the science of fire. We covered that in class too. But then I would hook him by doing that. Guess what he does now? Puts out fires in the summer, right? Kate Edwards at the top. Okay, she came into my class, loved wildlife, loved fish, loved all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I taught a wildlife class. I teach the sciencey stuff of wildlife. You think kids care about that today? Sorry, they don't really. Some of them do, right? The other ones, taxidermy is a good job. Anybody try to get anything done by a taxidermist lately? You're 18 months to 2 years out, right? They're making $100,000 a year as a taxidermist, and they're 18 months to 2 years out. So what did we cover in class? A job that's not typically seen in the classroom. And what'd she fall in love with? She fell in love with skulls and brains and doing all kinds of weird stuff that Mr. Manley would do, right? And they learned skills that now she's in the weekends, she makes between $100 and $300 a weekend interning for a taxidermist, right? These are different jobs, and that's my point. Like the forestry industry, we're on board. I don't know if you can tell, but the forestry industry is on board. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting right here. Okay, currently in Idaho, this is the forest sector jobs. Okay, the colors are the same. You might not be able to read it. Forest management, logging, and everything else. Milling, manufacturing, transportation. This is what we currently teach with the models that are in place in Idaho today, right? Forest management, logging, milling. Does anybody see a problem with that? If anybody else came to you with that graph right there, would you not say, holy cow, we're screwing up, right? Because holy cow, we're screwing up. Do we need forest management? Absolutely. University of Idaho's placed 100% of their students the last couple years, right? Because we don't have enough in that. But if we don't have more loggers, if we don't have more people working in our mills, none of the rest of it matters, right? $60 million does not end up in education, okay? What's being done? Support's everywhere, okay? There's bipartisan national support in the Jobs in the Woods Act. If you haven't heard of that, you should, okay? The Jobs in the Woods Act, bipartisan support by people that I never thought would sign on to anything logging ever, Jeff Merkley. But they have, right? I put my shot in there. Okay, the Idaho Career Ready students there, okay? Higher ed's done their part. I believe we had a 4-year degree and that's all we had forever and ever and ever. Now we have a 2-year degree, right? So we're trying to meet students where they are, right? My challenge to you, as they take the mic away from me, right? My challenge to you is what more can we do? Right? Some of you can probably do a lot more. Some are probably doing a lot. And I'm talking industry, I'm talking legislators, I'm talking every single person in the room, right? I know I can do more, and that's why I jumped ship from something I loved to do. I miss teaching every day, right? But I knew there was a bigger purpose. I knew it, I felt it, right? And so I uprooted my family and we came to Redneck, Idaho, which I love, by the way. Redneck from Eastern Oregon. We love being here. I miss the other, but it was because I knew I could do more, right? So my challenge to you is what more can you do? Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Blake. We know some of you have got tight schedules and all, so what we're going to do here now, I want to thank you all for coming, but we're going to have a little question and answer session that Travis Jones, if you haven't met Travis, Travis is new partner with Riley Stegner and Associates. He's around. You've got questions in the State House about forestry, ask Travis, ask Peter. They'll fill you in or find the answer for you. So he'll organize a question and answer with Blake or Dennis or anybody. But before you go, I just want to, on behalf of all of our sponsors, thank you for your time here today. Thank you for your service in the State House. We know it's hard work, and we know you're dedicated to making some tough decisions and doing the right thing. And as you get ready to leave, on each of your tables, there's a package of tissues. Now, these tissues were made in Lewiston, Idaho, by Clearwater Paper, but put those in your pocket because my experience has been as the session goes on, there'll be a time where you'll either have a tear of joy or a tear of great sadness leak out of your eye. That's the time to pull out one of these tissues and wipe that away and remember the magnificence of Idaho's forest and the comfort it brings you. Travis, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. All right, and again, thanks to everyone that's here. A little bit of Q&A for just a few minutes here. So, if anyone has questions, I'm going to do my best, and maybe, Blake, if you can help too, run the microphone around. So, questions of our panelists or of our speakers, I'll come find you. So, are there any questions? Raise your hand, stand up. Okay, hold on, Mr. Burns.
Thanks, Travis. Debbie Critchfield, I know you're still here somewhere. Are some of the jobs that the forest industry provides, are those launch-approved jobs?
Oh, boy. I'm going to say yes.
I would say I
Yes.
see a nexus,
So
but just out of curiosity, are they on
finding
the list?
I guess that's maybe even a question for Dennis or Blake, but finding a program that has that provides the technical skills to work some of the equipment would absolutely be under launch.
Thank you.
I think the 2-year would be 100% under launch. I think anything else in those. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Burns. Next questions. Any other questions? Questions?
So my question is kind of to the legislatures. I am a small private logging operation. It's a husband and wife team. I have 16-year-olds come up to me and say, hey, can I work for you? I'm stuck. I can't let them. That's when they're at the age that they're training, they're learning, they're ready. You got a 60-year-old woman sitting here, and I got a 16-year-old buff kid. I say, no, I have to run the chainsaw, but I could let you pick up that little piece of brush for me. I mean, how manly does that make some young people feel? We got to start letting them work when they're at the age they want to work. That's my comment, personal comment. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Representative Tanner.
Thank you. One of the first slides that was actually shown, it showed it a graph from 1990 all the way, and I believe you were the one that presented it. And what we saw was a lot of federal timber that we were actually getting, and as you've seen that number shrink. I think a lot of us know why, but maybe speak to that, and then for people in the room, for some of us legislators, where we can actually push back and how we can push back on the federal government and try to manage that, so we're not putting out fires, we're actually getting resources for the state.
Thanks, Representative Tanner. I might call on Craig Foss, State Forester, to help with this too. Craig, where are you at? There you are. I'll kick it over to you in a bit, but just for context, I think most people are aware of this, but it is good worth repeating that federal harvest on federal land certainly has decreased over years. Way back when, in the olden days, I guess you could say, they harvested more, but there were also questions about whether or not they were harvesting at sustainable levels. So we have to keep that in context. But the question really is, are they harvesting enough now? And what's happening on federal lands, obviously, is challenging. I know we have some of our federal partners in the room, and we know that you work very hard to try to increase those harvests, particularly around reducing wildfire risk. I think what I'd like to do, though, is have Craig talk to this a little bit in terms of G&A and sort of the efforts that are underway to really help to move that dial, because it's a really important thing in terms of the health of our forests in the state.
You bet. Thanks, Dennis. You look at the 19% of harvest on federal lands. When we started the Good Neighbor program, there was a recognition that because of that precipitous drop from the 90s, a lot of the staffing on the National Forest, a lot of that forestry expertise had gone, whereas the state of Idaho and a lot of states in the West still maintain that expertise. And so rather than complaining about the situation, our legislature said, you know what, Idaho Department of Lands, why don't you engage through a program that you can really help make a difference? And that difference is the Good Neighbor Authority program. We believe that our woods in Idaho are productive enough that we can make our program pay. The state legislature doesn't need to provide a dime for this program. All the revenue we generate pays our costs. In addition to that, one of the challenges on our national forests is the environmental analysis process, NEPA. And when we started GNA, we just envisioned ourselves doing timber harvest. What's actually happening is we're making enough money through GNA not only to pay our costs, to pay for the logging that we do, but to pay for helping with additional NEPA analysis on traditional timber sales. So overall, we should be seeing that harvest level on federal lands ticking up. But not only are we harvesting timber and helping with that, but there's an awful lot of restoration work that needs to happen on our national forests. Stream crossings, road maintenance, fuels treatment, reforestation, those types of things all need to happen in addition to the environmental analysis, and we're helping with all of those things. So it's a tribute, I think, to Idaho that, you know what, we can complain about this all we want, or we can be good neighbors and good partners, and that's what we're doing through that program.
Thank you, Craig. Another question or two before we have to let the legislators get back to work? Any other questions? Yeah, Ellen. Oh.
This is mostly for Blake and I guess anyone else who wants to comment, but I'm kind of curious, have you already seen any fruits of your labor as far as education goes? Because we're in a state right now where we're looking for foresters, you know, for our timber companies and anyone who manages timber. We're looking for good foresters that are ready to work. Just kind of get out boots on the ground right away, you know, when they start, and you know, fully trained. And we also are in need of loggers, obviously. All that field work, you know, all the staff that does that field work, we're there right now. So I'm curious if you've already started to see the fruits of your labor and of that education, and if not, maybe how long do you think we'll be able to minimize that section on the pie chart? You know, I'm just kind of curious because the time is right now. I mean, we're getting some momentum behind these programs, and just hoping that momentum continues.
So I'm from Oregon. Don't hold that against me, okay? Please don't hold that against me. So in 2016, Oregon passed Measure 98. Okay, this has context, I promise. Okay, Measure 98 was a CTE bill that put a bunch of money into career technical education. Very similar, I'm not going to say the same, very similar to our Idaho Career Ready Students Grant. Okay, so the state put some money forth, right? 2018, I started teaching. There were 6 programs before I started in Oregon. I was the 8th. Okay, by the time after some wicked hard 2020 in Oregon, if anybody knows how COVID was, oh my God. We now have 43 programs in the state of Oregon teaching forestry and natural resources. So through literally the hardest times of education ever in public education, maybe that's opinion, but I think it's pretty accurate. Okay, we grew a program because kids wanted it, because we were seeing the results. Okay, the results that I saw in Sweet Home, very small, but the results that I personally saw in Sweet Home. Okay, I interviewed the loggers. The average age of a logger in Sweet Home is between 44 and 46 years old. The average age of a logger in Oregon is 57. That's not a coincidence. Okay, so we saw them, they're there. Those are 2 of my former students that are on boots on the ground that would not have been. Right? Their family was in logging, but they didn't care. They weren't going that direction. Okay, so I would say the state of Idaho is 2 years away from seeing actual boots on the ground difference. Now, without support, without money, without K-12 forest education being pushed, I would say we're 6 to 10 years out. Right? And I think that proved in Oregon, because Oregon was like that before ballot measure 98 was passed, before programming got going, right? We were all, well, yeah, it'll get fixed eventually, right? Whereas that fixed it. Like, and communities, 43 of them in a state that hates loggers. I mean, realistically, Portland, Salem, Eugene hate loggers. Okay, and maybe I'm generalizing, but I lived there, so. This state's not that way, right? We love loggers. We love those hardworking people, mill workers and all that. Okay, we saw impact right away. So the proof's in the pudding.
Thank you. One more question, Representative Lanting.
I'll hurry.
What kind of jobs, or what is the skills you teach in the 2-year college program at the University of Idaho? And go Vandals.
Go Vandals. Dennis, you want to take that, or you want me to take that? I'll do half the skills. So I help run the student logging crew with Rob Keefe on the experimental forest. And we've got kids that are in the 2-year program that work for us. So they're actually being paid to be out there, and they're logging with me. So those are skills that maybe aren't part of, Dennis will hit the other, but maybe those skills aren't part of the degree, but because they're at the university and we have machinery that is up-to-date logging machinery, they're getting that experience while being paid. So that's one portion. Dennis?
Yeah, thanks for that. And so there's 3 associate degrees right now, only 3 at the university. One is in forest operations, that's what Blake's referring to. That's $2 million worth of logging equipment that we have our students out there with undeveloped frontal lobes who are operating very expensive equipment. That makes me nervous, but it's important. And then we have 2 others, nursery management and fire and fuels management. So firefighting and fuels management. So across those 3, we're just into the first year of those. We have about a dozen students. What's interesting is that we have lots of window shoppers, and this is maybe my request for assistance is that we have lots of students who are interested in these. They think it's a good path for them, but they're not sure about going on to these programs. And so in other words, we've had a lot of applications, a lot of window shopping, but they're not coming to us yet. And what we need is really folks in the communities, in the industry, and just in the communities of parents saying, this is actually a viable program. We have scholarships that are available to them. It could be nearly free for a student after they get the Launch Idaho and some of the other funding that's available. It's nearly free for them to get a 2-year degree with us. That's hard to say for a lot of things these days. So wait to be seen. Yeah.
Okay, one comment here. I'll race over.
We're talking about a lot of these places where Blake goes are rural communities, which is super important to link the rural communities to what's going on in the urban environment. And as we see more growth in our urban environments and more opportunities to use mass timber, whether that's for schools or other civic buildings, I'm wondering what the U of I is doing in that space to train architects, engineers, and contractors to use this resource that we have in this state.
We don't need to mention the awesome basketball arena that we, no, I'll let you do that.
If you haven't seen the basketball arena, it's pretty damn cool. Thanks for that. Just Julia Grant, if you don't know her. So that's a really important point, is that we're really trying to train everybody, the entire workforce, not just certain workforces. It's not one or the other. It's the entire workforce that's necessary. And so, here at Boise State and University of Idaho, other programs, there is a lot of emphasis right now on mass timber and training the next generation of architects, engineers, and all the other trades that go into that are represented in this room. That's so important. And so, yes, we would love to see more mass timber in state procurement, perhaps, is something to think about. There's lots of opportunities to really help the industry grow in different ways, and so thank you for that.
Matt, make it quick. We got to get these guys back.
It's more of a comment. I think one of the things, we're talking a lot about forestry here. It's Forestry Day, but all of the mills that are also independent or so all dependent on each other. In Idaho, in a lot of different ways, we get chips from all the sawmills. That's how we make paper and all that. But it's not just when you think of forestry jobs. We hire electrical engineers, we hire mechanical engineers, we hire chemical engineers, we hire accountants, finance people, we hire maintenance people, of course, and that's where we have a lot of needs. But most of our operations they're not, it starts in the woods, and if we don't have the loggers and we don't have that wood come in, and we have nothing. But Idaho's educational infrastructure supports all of these jobs, and we hire as much folks as we can locally, all of us. So it is a big universe when it comes to the needs that this industry has when it comes to getting talent.
Very good point. Well, we want to get our legislators back to the Capitol if they have 1:30 hearings or meetings. So thank you all again. Just to wrap it up, thanks again to our speakers, of course to Superintendent Critchfield for being here, obviously Dean Becker and Blake, thank you so much, and to our sponsors. All of you heard from them earlier today. It wouldn't happen without you, and of course the Society of American Foresters that are here. This is their event. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you all next year for the 31st. I think that's correct. And have a good walk back. Hopefully it's dry outside. We'll see you next year.